Hey guys, welcome back to Chaos Core Tech. My name's Garrett, and today we are going to be doing another Blender tutorial. If you missed the first one, I'd recommend going and checking that one out. I will put a link in the eye up in the corner, also down in the description, where we basically just went over basic movement stuff in Blender, moving the camera around, manipulating the vertices, the edges, and the faces of the object. So if you're familiar with all that, then we can go ahead and start getting a little more advanced. This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Alright, let's just jump into it. I've got a open Blender scene here, just the basic cube like we start with. I'm going to get rid of the light and the camera. You don't have to, you can leave them there. I just don't want them there. Next thing we're going to do is click on the cube and go into edit mode because this cube is what we're going to be using. I'm going to show you the three main tools that I use to make just about anything in Blender. There are a couple other things I'm going to add on, but there are three big ones. The first of which is just Extrude. Now, it is possible just to extrude an edge or a vertice, but that gets a little confusing. So for right now, just stick to face mode. When we're extruding, select a face or multiple faces and hit E on your keyboard. Or if you'd rather use the menus, this first little green button here is Extrude Region. And if we do it, I'm going to hit E on the keyboard, and you can see it just allows me to extrude that face up as far as I want it to go. So before we just had a cube, now we've got a slightly elongated cube that has an extra ring in it. And these are normal points and edges, so we can click on those, manipulate them however we want to, just like we did before. Like I can select this, grab it, move it out, and everything will still be, kind of how you'd expect it to work. So I'm going to undo those real quick. But just know that that's what Extrude does. And it's pretty self-explanatory. You click on something, extrude it out. And I can just keep doing this. Extrude, extrude, extrude. So you can kind of just keep building on here, and then I can take each of these faces, grab them, and do something else with them. Rotate if I want to. I can scale this up. Just all sorts of different ways we can mess with the object. I would recommend just playing with this a little bit. Like spend about 5 minutes. Pause the video, spend about 5 minutes clicking and extruding and kind of just moving things around. It'll get you pretty comfortable with it, and I think you'll feel a lot better moving forward. You can also extrude multiple faces. It does get a little weird. So like right now, if I just select those and hit E, see, I can pull them out to the side, and you'll see that it kind of just extrudes. It finds like a normal vector for the three faces that I selected and extruded them out, which works pretty well there. But say that I have selected a face on either side and I hit E, you can see that it kind of does something weird here where it just extrudes them up. So just be aware, and if you're uncertain, just extrude one face at a time. And I will show you a way that we can get around that in the future, but for right now we'll just keep it simple. So moving on from extruding, if we look on the left, right below it is Inset Faces, so that's the next one we're going to talk about. And it says it right in the name, faces, so just like Extrude, you're mostly going to want to use this just with a face. So don't worry about vertex or edge select modes, just select a face and then we can inset it. The keyboard shortcut is I, so that's what I'll be using, but you can also use the button over here. So with this selected, I am going to press I and then start dragging my mouse in towards the center. It won't let you go out any further because it's insetting, not outsetting. So I'm going to go in, and you can see that it hasn't changed the shape of the box. Like if I tab back out into edit mode, it still just looks like a normal box. But it's basically just giving us more vertices to work with. That's really all it's doing. So I can select this, move it up, and now I've got this shape going on. I can also extrude this new face, so I can hit E and bring it up, extrude. Do it again, extrude. Then I could take each of these edges around here, hit S and scale those out. So you can start to see that you can do a lot of interesting things with this. You can also do this across multiple faces. So if I select all of these, just these three on the outside here, and hit inset, you can see that it will inset those three faces, and they are connected. There are some options down here in this panel in the bottom left. So if I click on that, you can tell it to do different things. The big one that you're going to want to pay attention to is individual. So if I click individual, you will see that it makes each face behave as its own separate face, and then if I uncheck it, it combines all of them and insets it. And then of course you can set the thickness here, so if you wanted it bigger or smaller, you can drag up and down or type in a specific number there. Then with these selected, you can do everything else you normally do. Like I can extrude that out, I can rotate it, grab it. You're starting to see a theme, I'm sure. Okay, moving on from inset, we're going to skip the bevel one for right this second and move right below it down to loop cut. So this one, pretty self-explanatory as well. It's basically just inserting a cut into the middle of any object. And just like the inset, the shape of the object has not changed, but we have more vertices to work with. So I'll click Control R and then move my mouse around, and you'll see that there is a yellow line that comes up. And that's basically showing me where the new loop would be inserted if I were to confirm it with left click. And also something to note that can be kind of confusing the first time you use this is see that I'm hovering over the middle of this face here and nothing is coming up. You actually want to go over a edge, because that will give Blender enough information to tell it to cut along the middle of that edge. So I'm hovering over this edge here, and you can see that the loop cut would cut right through the middle of that edge, and then it needs to go around the entire object to be a full loop. So if I want to cut it across the ground plane, I would come to one of these side edges here. So just remember that the middle of the face is not where you want. You need to give Blender more information, so go to the edge and that's where it will work. Now the loop cut can be a little more involved. There's multiple steps and there's several points where we can do more things. So right here where I have not confirmed or canceled, it's just showing me the preview of where it is. I can use the scroll wheel on my mouse, and if I scroll up, you'll see that it's gonna insert more. So as I scroll up, it goes from 1 to 2 to 3, and I mean, you can keep going into infinity, I'm sure. But something to remember is if you have too many points, 1, it's really hard to work with, and 2, it starts to bog Blender down. But you know, there's a lot of instances where I would insert 8 loops into something to do something specific. So just say I wanted to cut this into 3, I can scroll wheel up twice, click with my left mouse, and now I have 3 loops in there. But say that we just wanted to cut it once, we can left click to confirm, but we're actually not done. Now you'll notice that if you move your mouse, it's still attached to your mouse and it is now sliding across the object. So this is actually another confirm or cancel moment. So something to keep, but it's not going to cancel the full action. So if you want to slide it and put it in a different place, you can just move it to where you want it, left click, and that confirms it. But sometimes you want it to be directly in between 2 points, like the preview showed. So I'll hit Control R again, and you can see that the preview is directly in the middle. So I'll click it, and it's sliding right now, but if I right click now, it'll just cancel the slide and not cancel the whole operation. So I can right click even if my mouse is over here, and it'll snap it right to the center. So like I said, it's a little weird, but it'll start to make sense, and it'll become like second nature pretty quickly if you use it. And if you just don't want to deal with any of that, and you're using the button over here because it's a little more straightforward with the button, this menu down in the bottom left becomes your friend, because even though I've fully clicked and canceled everything here, I still have the option to change the number of cuts. So it says 1 here. I can use this little arrow to bump up to a specific number of cuts. And I can also change the factor, which is the slide of it, and you can see it's in the center right now. So if I drag it this way, it'll move, and if I drag it this way, it'll move the other way. So that's the nice thing about Blender, is that even after you've confirmed all this and done all your mouse inputs, you still have the option until you do another action to basically change what you've just done. This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of online classes covering all sorts of different skills. There's a premium membership that gives you full access to the classes, so if you're trying to pick up a new creative skill, Skillshare can help you with all of the skills you want to learn. It's a great place to fuel your creativity and point you in the right direction. In this video, I've been giving you a really beginner-focused look at Blender, but if you're interested in taking this even further, or if you already know how to use Blender and are just looking to hone your skill, Skillshare has a plethora of classes for you. For example, your first day in Blender 3D by Southern Shoddy 3D has over 6,000 students that have taken it, so there's a built-in community there to share your progress with as you learn how to become a modeling wizard. And as I mention in every video, they also have a bunch of stuff on other 3D modeling programs. So if you are interested in Maya, ZBrush, or even CAD, there are classes for you as well. So whether you're trying to learn something new or improve your knowledge on an existing skill, Skillshare is an extremely useful tool. It's curated specifically for learning, meaning there are no ads, and they're always launching new premium classes so you can stay focused and follow wherever your creativity takes you. The first 1,000 people to click the link in the description below will get you 1 month free trial of Skillshare so you can explore your creativity. Thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. All right, just a quick recap. We can extrude, we can inset, and we can loop cut. And you can see that the more complex the geometry, we can do more interesting loop cuts. But using those three things, we can actually create pretty insanely complex models. But I also want to demonstrate how you would kind of go about this. So I'm going to make a low poly person just from the starting box that we have. And that's another thing to keep in mind if you're just starting out with modeling. You know, don't try to create something insanely detailed or that is something that needs to be perfect. Stick with something simple, stick with simple shapes, and low poly is always a good option. And I'm probably going to show you one extra technique in here that involves the extrude, but we'll get to that in a second. So we start out with this box, and that actually looks like a pretty good boxy head. So I'm going to select all that, snap to the front view using 1 on the numpad. I'm going to move it up to about where the head would be, and that's where we'll start. So in order to move down to the body, we need a neck. So to do that, I'm going to inset right here, and then I'm going to extrude down. That gives us a neck. Now I'm going to extrude down again for the torso. Now this is where we will do something interesting. So we're going to extrude, but I'm going to do it in a slightly different way. So I'm going to select all of these faces by holding Shift and clicking on them. And then if I were to hit extrude right now, E, you can see that it just creates this weird tube thing, and the geometry gets all messed up, as you can see right here. So that is not what we want to do. What we actually want to do with it is extrude along normals. And to briefly explain normals, it's more complicated than this, but it's basically just the direction that the face is pointing. But that also allows you to extrude along them. And if you come over to this extrude region and then hold down left click on it, you'll see that we come up with several different options here, and one of them being extrude along normals. And so that's what we're going to be doing here, but I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut. Normal extrude is just E, but if you hit Alt E, it brings up this menu. So I'm going to click that, and then as I start moving my mouse out, you can see that the box is expanding out. Now, normal bodies are not this boxy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scale it on the Y a little bit and then scale it on the X a little bit to give it a little more width. So from here, I'm going to select this bottom face, extrude it down again, and I'm going to scale it on the X just to kind of taper it in. I'm going to select this ring here by Alt clicking on it. It selects the whole ring, and I'm going to bring that in just a little bit as well. And obviously this is going to be a very cartoony looking character. But from here, I can create the pelvis area by bringing that down. And I probably want this a little bit thicker, about there. And I'm going to give him a little bit of a gut. I'm going to bring that in and bring it forward. And I'm going to bring this one forward just a little bit as well. Kind of tweak it a little bit. Maybe bring this up a little bit by grabbing it and moving it along the Z. And then I'm probably going to grab this face and oops. Then I'm going to grab this face and just move it down a little bit more. Now we need legs. And this can be kind of complicated, but really all we're going to do is just add a couple loop cuts and extrude out some legs. So I'm going to hit Control R, and you can see that there's just a loop cut running along the entire thing here. I'm going to scroll up once so we have 2 lines, click with my left mouse button, and then click with my right mouse button to confirm or to cancel the slide here, and it'll just snap right to the middle so we know everything's symmetrical. Then from here I can just select these 2 faces by holding Shift when I click, and I'll go back to the front view with 1 on the numpad and just extrude those down. So like I said, pretty goofy looking, but basis of legs right there. Then we need some arms, and for that I'm going to add another loop cut here, slide it down just slightly, and then I can select these 2 faces. And this is another example of extrude not being good enough, so we need the extrude along normal. So I'm going to hit Alt-E, and then I can drag the mouse out, and we have some arms. So at its most basic level here, this is a person. It looks like crap, but it's a person. It has all the necessary things. So using those 3 techniques, I can go around and sort of just edit it here. I'm going to speed it up a little bit just so you can see my process. But during this, all I'm going to be using is loop cuts. So I'm going to be inserting more loops and then selecting faces and rings and scaling them. That's really all I'm going to do here. Also, a good thing to keep in mind if you have a symmetrical object like this, you can turn on symmetry to make your life quite a bit easier. Up in the top right, there's this little tool that's just symmetry options. So I have this symmetrical across the x-axis. As you can see here, this red line is the x-axis. So this face right here should be symmetrical to this face that runs right along this x-axis. So if I click X up here, now it should try to detect and move them together. So I only have this face right here selected. If I move it, you can see that the one on the other side moves as well. That'll just make your life a lot easier. Okay, so like I said, really all I did was insert loops and add more vertices, and this is what I was able to come to in just a few minutes. In real time, this took me, I think, about 7 minutes. So not a bad base for something to start with for a low poly human. And remember that we started with the cube, and all we did was use those 3 tools. We extruded, we inserted rings, and we inset faces. So not too bad. I do want to go over one more thing before we move on, and that is just bevel. And the reason I don't really use this that often is it can be achieved pretty easily other ways. So let me show you an example here. And then I come over here, you can see that below Inset Faces is a tool called Bevel. And you can click that and use it, or you can hit Control B and drag out, and you'll see that it just bevels the edge, which is super nice. But, and then of course you've got all the options down here that you can do a lot more interesting things with. Notably, one that's super handy is the segments. So if you want something a little more rounded, you can bevel it and then add segments, and it curves it really nicely. So that is one of the things I do use it for. But if most occasions, all I really do is I just use the insert, bring it up, and then I can scale this top one down, and it achieves the exact same thing. So that's what I'll do most of the time, but it is handy just to know that the bevel is there, and you can get some pretty cool looks. Like if I select everything here by just hitting A and then hit Control B, it will bevel all the edges, and like I said, with the number of segments that I have, it looks pretty nice. And I mean, you can crank that up so you don't really see anything. Like I can go all the way up to 32. You probably wouldn't want to do this, but you technically can do it. So I'll undo and then just do it again. But even just with one segment, it still looks pretty cool. So those are some pretty specific use cases, but the bevel tool can be very, very handy, so you should know it exists. Okay, so I think that's where I'm going to leave this one. It was a lot of information again, but it should be enough to get a decent start. You can actually model things now, so what I recommend doing is pick something simple that you can make a low poly version of. Like maybe pick an animal, or just a simpler object. Furniture works pretty good. Something that you would find interesting to model, and just try to create a really, really simple low poly version of it, and you know, get the basic shape and then move in and just start adding some more detail. In the next video, I'm probably going to go over how to manage your geometry a little bit more, because using a lot of these tools, specifically Bevel, can get you into some trouble, and if you extrude the wrong way, you can end up with some pretty funky geometry. So I'll probably go over how to like merge vertices and make sure that your objects aren't basically just a bunch of random floating polygons that don't really do anything. And then I might also have a video where we just make something. Like I'll probably just pick an object. I typically do Pokeballs, and show how to make a really nice looking Pokeball, because that uses a lot of the techniques and shows how to go about doing something like that. So let me know what you thought down in the comments. If you're having any issues, let me know down in the comments. I can try to either answer them there or answer them in the next video. And just thank you for watching. Also, thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video and making it possible. That's where I'm going to leave this one. So again, thank you for watching, and until next time, keep creating.